Hey legends, Blake here with another video, and for today's one I want to bring you my presentation from the recent Underwater Pet Expo. Now, I recorded both days and I've stitched it together, hopefully to make it a bit more interesting, to give you the best bits from both days. It was so great to see so many fantastic faces in the crowd, and I had an absolute blast. So if you were there, then thanks for tuning in a second time. And if you weren't, I'm glad that I can show you the same talk that I gave everybody else. So it's quite a long one, so let's jump straight into it. Okay, good morning everyone. If you're not familiar, my name's Blake. That's me over there. I just make YouTube videos and 3D print some stuff, but today I want to talk about breeding for profit, because for the last 3 or 4 years I've been consistently selling a number of fish, both online and to shops, shipping them to interstate, as well as doing pick up and drop off in person. Unfortunately, I'm not at the point where I can quit my day job, and I think that's probably the first mistake, or the first thing is, it's not a get-rich-quick scheme by any means, and really what you're aiming for is to offset your electricity, your food, and things like that. So the key pillars, I think, if you don't love keeping the fish that you intend to breed for profit, you've already lost. I think so long as you love the fish in the first place, anything from that point is gravy. And the other thing is, if you're selling to stores, relationships are actually key, and you're far better off in the long term having 50 cents less per fish, but having a great relationship with those that you're dealing with. Consistency is key as well. I see some people that have like one big batch of fry or a couple of big batches of fry, sell them all up, and then there's sort of a frenzy from the community or the local fish stores reaching out saying, I need more of those fish, but you've already sold them all. So you're better off sort of drip feeding them out and keeping that consistent run going. The last one as well, I think that's really important, is what is your competitive advantage? So we'll talk about it a little bit later on one of the other slides, but for me, part of what I do, my second hobby, if you will, is 3D printing. And if you have watched the channel, I've definitely spoken about these egg collectors before. I probably won't go into depth about it today because I'm assuming most people know about it, but if you don't, I'll happily talk to you after this about how it works. But for me, that's my competitive advantage. So that makes the particular fish that I breed and sell a lot easier than next door neighbors. So that's why I can do that perhaps better than they can. That edge doesn't have to be something that you invent. It doesn't have to be sort of you don't have to be an engineer or anything to come up with that edge. That edge might be just you have an extra amount of passion for something in particular that the person next door to you doesn't have. So might be you do an extra feeding per day, or you can grow it a little bit faster than anybody else. But that's really important, I think, for long-term success breeding fish for a profit. So in terms of the setup, I'd say you need at least 5 tanks to consistently breed and sort of do the plan that I'm laying out. It's much easier with fish that can community breed or are less voracious on the fry or eggs, mainly because it gives you more time to collect them, take them out. And the reason I suggest separating them out is because then you can target feed the actual fry, either more feeds per day, different foods, things like that. So I like to have one main breeding tank, and then I'll move the newborn fry or wrigglers into another tank. I'll then, at about 1 month, take some of the larger fish out again, so that they're not over competing for the food with the smaller ones as well. Gives everyone sort of a fair playing field, and allows everyone to eat and grow. This is what a typical breeding tank would look like for me. This is not one of my breeding tanks, but very, very simple setup. You don't need the Ritz to do this. Sponge filter I think works best. Some moss, again it depends on what medium your particular fish breed in. A heater if you don't heat the room, and simple light. This is what all of those other tanks would look like as well. I'd set them up very much the same. I do like to put some sort of live plant in there, especially because with newborn fry it's quite difficult to do things like gravel vac, because you might accidentally suck up some fry. So in tanks like that, I prefer a sponge filter so that I can get a turkey baster or something swish up all of the detritus or uneaten food, allow that to collect in the sponge filter, and then clean the sponge filter instead. With newborn fry, they actually expend quite a lot of energy getting to the food, so a smaller tank sometimes is the better option, depending on how much work you want to do maintaining that, or depending on how liberal you are with the foods that you feed. After that, they can use a bit more energy, so I move them up typically to a Kmart tank, 20 litres or so, and then a 40 litre tank after that to sort of move them up and sell them from that point. In terms of foods, if you do want to breed a lot of fish, I absolutely recommend live foods as an essential. Baby brine shrimp is, of course, sort of widely rated as the best one, and I agree with that. I also feed a lot of microworms and vinegar eels because I think they're pretty easy to culture, pretty versatile as well. For example, vinegar eels are going to stay up in the water column, so if you've got fish like guppies or other fish that are going to really want the top of the water column, vinegar eels are your go. Whereas if you've got something that's going to hang down the bottom, microworms are going to do that for you. In terms of pellets, recently I really like DRP and Vitalis because they're nice and soft. You can crush them up in your fingers, and for me, when I have so many aquariums, I like that because I can have the one container of food and sort of crush it up to different consistencies for the different size fish that I'm breeding. Otherwise, I've definitely crushed up lots of pellets in my wife's NutriBullet. Please don't tell her, but that works quite well as well. So I like to feed 1 to 3 times per day. Obviously, if a lot of us work and things like that, it's not always that easy. But if you are someone that can't do that, then it's a better idea to breed fish that are going to have larger fry because they will be less reliant on multiple feeds per day. But the more you can do, the better. And it's better to do multiple smaller feeds than one large one. Water changes, of course, the more the better. I don't think I'm bringing anything new to the table there. Again, frequent small volume water changes are going to lower your likelihood of shocking the fish. And when you are setting up the sponge filter as well, if you do have a really high volume of air going through that, sometimes you can see fry getting stuck to the outside of the sponge. So just keep an eye on that, make sure that they can actually swim away from it. So you have fry, and now what? I'd say before you approach anyone, unless you are just going to do a one-off Gumtree sale, which is fine as well, have future batches ready to go. As well, I see sometimes, I'll be at the fish store and somebody will bring in an old bucket and I have some paint, crusty, disgusting paint on it. It might say like chemicals, and then they've crossed it out and written fish on the front. They plonk that on the counter, say, I got these fish here, give me $1 million for them. And it's just, not really a great sales pitch. Far better if you can purchase some fish bags, really affordable, just grab them off eBay, rubber bands. And I've never used O2, so I don't believe it's necessary. And for some fish, it can actually be detrimental, like bedders. We can talk about that another time. As well as that, styrofoam boxes. Everyone's trying to get rid of styrofoam boxes, including myself. But you can go to pharmacies, things like that, things where you're going to get deliveries of cold things. Butchers are another one, and get free styrofoam boxes super easy. So know what you have, be sure of how many fish you can sell, and whether you're selling like an unsexed group, pairs, trios, whatever, make sure that you can sustain that as well. Like people I know have sold pairs of guppies, but then because of the temperature that they're keeping them at, they might have a high percentage of males or females, and then you're left with tons and tons of females or males because of your sort of distribution that you're getting. Go in there with a plan, knowing how much you need to make, to cover food or whatever you want to, whatever outcome you want to achieve. Be sure of how many you can produce in a period of time. So it's much, much better to go in and say, I've got these fish here, I can produce 20 per month at $5 each. But also be prepared to negotiate. So if they say, okay, well that price we can do on store credit, but not in cash, have an idea in your head already about what you're going to do in those circumstances. So in terms of selling privately, I've done some content on this in the past, but if you need to sell on Gumtree, then be set up to ship. The number one question you will get is, do you ship? Apart from, is this available? And build in a margin of error as well. Especially the last few years, shipping has been an absolute nightmare. So don't have razor thin margins where you lose one shipment and it's a total disaster. Build in enough fat in there so that you can, I know none of us like to lose any fish, but if a disaster does happen, then you're not sort of fully out of pocket. Be prepared for lowballers, ghosts, dishonest people and scammers, of course, and basically any extra money you make from private sales, in my opinion, you will be trading for time and energy. So if you've got plenty of one or the other, then you can make your choice accordingly. But I find Gumtree just best for one-off sales. If you do have a big batch of, cribs or something like that, a fish store's not really likely to take, and you don't really have any interest in breeding ongoing, well, it's best to sort of put those on Gumtree or give them to a friend, fellow hobbyist, and things like that. In terms of selling to stores, don't go in the middle of the day on a Saturday. Go on a quiet day, look presentable, be organized, take in some fish to show, being prepared to take them home if need be. These fish stores are sort of risking quite a bit to take on your fish. They don't know what your conditions are at home. They do know what the conditions are at wholesalers. So that is one area where you can very easily get multiple competitive advantages because you are competing with wholesalers at that point. And wholesalers, they don't have great customer service. They don't always have healthy fish, and they're definitely not accustomed to your local water. So you've got three advantages right there. As long as you can, keep your attitude up, be presentable, and be reliable. It's a good idea to ask your local fish store, what's moving really well? What can't you get a lot of? And if that aligns with what you want to keep, why not? It's just a mutually beneficial outcome there. So I've definitely done that before, and I wanted to keep endless and things like that, so I've brought some of those on. So the trade-off, stores will often offer store credit. So for me personally, with the fish that I sell, approximately I can get 30% more in store credit versus cash. Be flexible and maintain a good relationship. So there's definitely times where I have needed cash more than credit, and at that point, I'd negotiate a combination of both perhaps. It really depends on what your particular wants and needs are, but stores can often, if you get more in credit, use that for food, and your margins have instantly gone up. The best thing about selling to local fish stores, though, is that there's no customer service, no complaints, no refunds, no lowballers, no ghosts and all those sorts of things. And at least in my experience, some of the best relationships that I have within the hobby are those of local fish store employees that now I've known for quite a long time, and we have a good relationship. And there's another benefit as well there, that they can often let you know if particular fish come in. Maybe if you want something a little bit special, they can order it in for you, and they might do little favors for you here and there, which can certainly help. So I happily take questions. I know some people don't like to ask questions in the crowd, so I'll hang around here as well. But other than that, hope you have a great day. Thanks for sticking around, and enjoy the show. Okay, so if you couldn't hear the question, it was how do you know how much to ask? How do you come up with that figure if you're approaching a store? Because you sort of only know what they're going to sell them for, but that's really all you can go by. I think somewhere between 30 and 50% of the retail price is where I like to go, because you got to think that the store has to have the actual rental or the cost of the building, electricity, staff, and things like that. Typically, that's what I would get, somewhere about 40%. And how old would a fish be before I sell it? Obviously, it depends on the type of fish. With small cyprinids, like you mentioned, you're going to try and do CPDs. I sell them about 3 months. It's one of those things where I guess I've been in a lot of local fish stores, we probably all have, and I just think, would somebody see that in a tank and want to buy it? But the bigger the better. Certainly, if you get an ongoing relationship, you take in some really nice jumbo German blue rams, and the shop's like, we're onto a winner here, and then 3 months later you're taking in rams half the size, they're not going to take that. So that's another good consideration when you are actually approaching the stores, is the size that you're going to show them, is that the size that you can keep up consistently. So it's hard to know, because probably you've had a lot more time to have that initial batch grow up, but these are all things you've got to consider. But yeah, so I just think what's the average size that they have, similar fish, and that's what I try and match. Okay, so that question was, do I take cash? Do I have to set up an ABN? How does it work in terms of the actual finances? So I'm not a financial advisor, and I'm not a tax accountant. So seek out your own professional advice. I think that's what I have to say legally, but I declare it as a hobby income. So I don't have an ABN, and I just take cash or credit, depending on the time. I've definitely taken a mixture of cash and credit too, because at certain points, I've also traded for fish. There's definitely benefits for that as well. It depends on your individual circumstances. If it's close to my wife's birthday, I'll probably more likely take cash. All good? All right. Thanks a lot. Yeah, enjoy the show. So there you go, guys. That was my presentation. Hopefully you liked it. If you stuck around to here, it always helps me out to smash like, hit subscribe, and all that fun stuff. Good luck with your breeding for profit, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching.